Hello, Willie. How are
Hey,
you?
good. How are you?
Good, thanks, mate. It's lovely to see you.
It's nice to see you too. What's up, guys? Welcome back to Wild Willie's Book Reviews. Today I'm here with James Mullinger, the author of Brit Happens, which I just recently interviewed on my channel. So, yeah, is there anything you'd like to say about yourself to introduce yourself to the viewers?
Well, just that it's an honor to be here with you. I'm a fan of your work. I'm a fan of your reviews. I'm a fan of your interviews. I loved the interview you did with the gentleman in the library in Nova Scotia, which I just thought was a really wonderful thing for you to do to highlight. I mean, libraries is where I spent most of my childhood. Libraries is where I actually wrote most of my book. In fact, I think a lot of the librarians in New Brunswick and Nova Scotia were wondering who this strange Englishman was, spending hours and hours sat in the corner. But I feel inspired in libraries, so I really love what you're doing, Willie, in highlighting those kind of creative and fulfilling spaces, but also what you do celebrating and highlighting Atlantic Canadian authors. So I salute you.
Thank you very much. That means a lot to me, and I'm so excited that you like all my work. So,
Absolutely.
what do you think kind of was the inspiration behind your book? I know moving to Canada was kind of the background, but what do you think inspired you to write a book about it?
Good question. I think it was very much wanting to essentially write a love letter to this region. And I think you know how much I love this place, and I came here for a better quality of life. I came here because I wanted my children to have an upbringing in a place like the Maritimes, where there is this kind of sense of community, beautiful views, and friendly people. A creatively fulfilling place, but I don't think I ever expected that it would be such an amazing place for my kind of career to, I wouldn't say take off, but I would say for it to, for myself to feel fulfilled. Like, I mean, I've really never been happier, both personally, but also creatively. So really wanting to kind of highlight that. So I see the book as it's partly a memoir. It's also partly a travelogue, taking me kind of through, or taking the reader through all of my adventures on the road, and trying to be kind of brutally honest with it, highlighting mistakes I've made, bad gigs I've had, stupid things I've done, wanting to kind of highlight all of those things. It was Goose Lane Editions, the amazing Fredericton, New Brunswick-based publisher, Canada's oldest independent book publisher, who I went in to speak to them about a photography book idea that I had. I wanted to work on with an amazing photographer by the name of Sean McGrath, and when I was in there, they said, "What do you think about writing a book about your own journey?" And I mean, it's certainly something I've always wanted to do. But I don't think I ever would have had the confidence to say, "Hey, anyone want a book from me?" So the fact that they suggested it was a real honor, and I'd started work on it in late 2019. But thanks to the old COVIDs, I was able to actually get the thing done and finished. Because otherwise, I think I would probably be sitting here at the laptop trying to write it rather than having the pleasure of talking to you about it existing.
Yes, that's amazing, and
Mm.
congratulations on getting the book out. Like I
Uh,
said in my interview, I loved it. I definitely, yeah, it was a great book. One
Thank
of my
you.
favorite things about the book that I highlighted in my review was when you met Jerry Seinfeld. What do you kind of think, like, how was that feeling when you first met him?
It was, I tell you what, honestly, it was a relief at first, because my biggest fear was that, that old adage that people say about never meet your heroes. My biggest worry was, well, what if A, he's a jerk? Or B, what if, because also I was meeting him in a professional context like this, like you interviewing me, I was interviewing him. And I thought, well, I need to get certain things from him for this interview to work. So that might mean what if he hates me? Was kind of the thing. Or what if I hate him? So all of these things were going through my mind. So it was a relief at first, A, that he was just charm personified and just the nicest and kindest person. We also had him, we were giving him for about an hour. He ended up staying for kind of half the day, and we did more and more stuff with him, photos and video and audio. So it was firstly a relief, but then afterwards, I mean, I was just on a high for weeks afterwards, and in many ways, I mean, still am. I still can't believe that I got to spend that time with him. And of course, there was various things that have happened since then. I mean, notably him writing a very nice email to me afterwards, and us meeting up on subsequent occasions. So it was the start of a wonderful thing, and it would definitely it made me feel good. And I think it's one of those things that we often don't. We never know what our heroes are going to be like when we meet them. And I've met other. I mean, I've been. I would say most kind of famous or successful people that I've met have been nice. I wouldn't say anyone has been. Well, actually, there's a few. There's a few that have been absolutely vile, but we can talk about those later off the record. But yeah, it felt amazing, and he, to this day, he's someone that I admire. I admire his work ethic, and I love the fact that he does, he can work clean. And it was just, it was really one of those moments that I kind of thought, and it's, I mean, well over a decade ago now, and I think I'm at the time thinking, I hope I'm still excited about this in years to come, and sure enough, I am.
Yeah, so that's really cool. I really enjoyed that part of your book. What do
Thank
you
you.
think, as the author, was your favorite part about writing the book?
That's a good one. It was weird because obviously I was kind of doing it. One of the things that we had talked about earlier on, and I worked with an amazing editor by the name of James Langer, who is also a highly critically acclaimed poet. He was also the president or director of Breakwater Books in Newfoundland for many years, and has edited kind of hundreds of books, and is a kind of highly respected educator as well. So I knew I was in safe hands with him, and he kind of just said, "Look, just write, just start writing, and and we'll worry about the structure later." And even though it is for the most part chronological, um, we do get. I mean, so I think, I mean, and so very last month I had the pleasure of actually recording the audio book of the book, which was the first time, to be honest, that I've kind of sat and when I was obviously copy editing it and kind of proofreading it in the final stages, and you're kind of looking at it in a different way. So it was quite weird standing there actually reading it for the first time. And so only at that point did I kind of really get a real feel for it. And it's a very surreal experience, kind of standing in a recording studio all day. Well, I say all day, it was like 7 days. And you'd read a whole chapter all the way through. And then I was working with an amazing sound engineer and producer by the name of Paul Milner, who's a British guy who also moved to the Maritimes, and he's worked with all these kind of greats like Keith Richards, and so it was quite nerve-wracking. But he kind of was very strict, and rightly so. We hired him because he's the best at what he does. But I would do the whole chapter, give it my all, and really perform it. And he'd go, "Yeah, I think you can do better," and I'd go back and do it again. And so to answer your question, I mean, I definitely felt like it was the bits that I really, really loved reading were the bits about kind of meeting my wife, falling in love with my wife. Because I think that for part of my life is probably the most transformative thing, in that, it's, I think it's very clear to anyone that's read the book or anyone that's seen my act that moving to the Maritimes changed my life. But just visiting the place for the first time is the thing that inspired me, and I fell in love with this place so much, and it's inspired me in so many ways. But to think that, with that kind of sliding doors concept of like, you don't meet someone, or you do meet someone, and your life changes in all these different ways. To think that if I hadn't met my wife on that day in September 2000, that I could now, aged 45, be sat in London somewhere, miserable, having never heard the words New Brunswick or the Maritimes or Atlantic Canada. So I think that was the moment that I really enjoyed most, thinking, wow, all of the wonderful things that have happened to me in life and all the things that have brought me joy and happiness all stemmed from meeting my wife on that day in September 2000.
Yeah, that's amazing. So,
Thanks.
do you think that, with your experience of writing that book, that you might be interested in writing more books in the future?
It's an excellent question, William. Funny enough, I am. I mean, I've actually been sat here this morning working on the next one. I have many, many stories that filling this book. I'm writing all kind of shorthand at the moment. Yeah, I feel like a lot of it stemmed from, I loved doing the book tour. I loved going on the road, reading from the book, talking about the book. But what I realized quite quickly was people would ask questions, and these questions would throw up a story, and I would suddenly tell a story that I'd be like, wow, why didn't I put that in the book? I mean, and a couple of examples of this. I got into a pen pal relationship with Kate Winslet when I was quite young. In that I was obsessed with the book Sense and Sensibility. and fell in love with the character. I was a very kind of lonely teenager, didn't really have many friends, and so I fell in love with this character of Marianne in Sense and Sensibility. And because Kate Winslet played her in the film, I fell in love with Kate Winslet. So I wrote to her and said, just so you know, I'm in love with your character, and blah blah blah. And she replied, and we got into this kind of pen pal exchange that went on for some time. It's bizarre now when I read these letters, and it kind of ended at this point where she said, "Look, I'm sorry, I may not apply for some time. I'm going to LA to beg a director for this role that might change my life." And of course, timing wise, it doesn't take a genius to work out that this was James Cameron and Titanic. And I don't know why I'd kind of forgotten to put it in the book. I think partly because my first book was very much as a love letter to Atlantic Canada. It's very much about my journey here. So all of the stories that are in the book that happened prior to my arrival here are all really about what led me to this place and why I love this place. So, for example, stories on being bullied at school are in there because part of what I love about this place is the inclusive nature of it, the way in which people are kind to each other. So I felt like the bullying stories were relevant to that because that was why I loved this place. The Kate Winslet story possibly didn't fit into that, but there's tons of stories like that. Again, there was another one which came up during a Q&A at the Halifax Public Library, where when I was about 9 years old, I was at a pantomime of Cinderella with my grandmother, and I was kind of pulled on stage, and my mum said to this day that there was this kind of look in my eyes that she'd never seen before when I heard everyone kind of clapping and cheering. Now, again, I mean, a shrink would be far better qualified to analyze this, but I find it fascinating. Was that the moment when I kind of realized that, hey, maybe all my insecurities and paranoias and anxieties could be cured by pursuing a career which involves standing on a stage with people clapping and laughing. But I guess possibly, but equally, that is also a job that also has given me a lot of anxiety as well. But I'm well into the kind of thick of writing the second one, and I hope it's as well received as the first. But you never know. And a part of the fun process is the nerve wracking. That was the thing with the first one. It was very nerve wracking. Was writing it and not knowing how it was going to be received, especially when you're opening up quite a lot. So I feel a bit more confident now with the second one, knowing what people liked about the first one. I'm like, okay, I'll do more of that and less of that.
Yeah, it sounds amazing. I can't wait to read that as well.
Thanks, mate. You'll be the first to get one, my friend.
Sounds good. So, do you think that the second book will kind of be a sequel, or do you think it will be about a whole another topic? Or yeah,
Good question. I think, yeah. I mean, I guess in essence it would be a sequel, and because I'm someone that loves movies and loves sequels, part of me would like to just call it Brit Happens too. Uh, but um, but I think it will have a theme, and the theme could possibly be more to do with the fact that like this is my 10th year living in Canada. It could be essentially what I've learned in 10 years of being here, and I guess that's what the one thing we haven't landed on is what's the theme and what's the overarching. Because even with a memoir or indeed a series of tales, you want a kind of a beginning, middle, and an end, which I think the first one does, in that it's kind of an essay about the concept of home. And I mean, growing up, all of my favorite films were about home. Like when I think about everything from The Wizard of Oz to Martin Scorsese's After Hours, even the kind of the gang drama, The Warriors, they're all movies about people trying to find their way home. And I felt like the first book was very much about I was someone that never really felt like, not, and this isn't to disparage my childhood home as such, but I never really felt at home at school, in anything I did, until I found this place. So it's really about the nature of home. So I think the second one will be similarly themed, and maybe it'll be about kind of trying to find comfort in myself. I don't know, but yeah, as of now, it's a series of stories, hopefully funny stories, and indeed things that have happened to me in the last, 12 months since the book was written. Because I mean, one of the funniest things about being on doing this job is crazy things happen to you all the time. I mean, someone that you know very well once turned up at a show, and we were hanging out backstage, and would you believe they gave me a foot-long donair? I mean, I'm sure you can't imagine who that possibly could have been, but that is a story that that makes the book, which is me sitting in a travel lodge in Pictou County trying to eat a foot-long donair. I mean, that's a chapter in itself. And I'm blessed enough to have met many wonderful people like the wonderful person we are both thinking of right now, who I'm a huge fan of also.
Yeah, thank you very much. Um, one last question. Is there anything that you would like to tell anybody watching, or anybody that maybe wants to write a book or get started with anything like that, or maybe is into comedy?
Good question. I mean, I guess the trick with anything is just to do it, right? I mean, I remember asking the comedian Jimmy Carr quite early on, like, what was the, essentially, like, what's his secret, or what advice would he give? And he just looked at me and said, gig, 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 gig. And it was true. And it's one of those things that I was kind of, I guess as a new comedian, I was kind of looking for a shortcut, but it was like, there isn't a shortcut. Get on stage as often as possible, as frequently as possible, write as much as possible, and eventually you'll get good. And similarly with writing, I mean, I have friends, a friend of mine by the name of Alex Preston, who's written a series of very well received books over the years. I remember he worked in the City of London as a banker, as a trader, and so worked kind of 18-hour days, but always wanted to be a novelist. And somehow, despite working 18-hour days and having a wife and children, he found time to write a book. And really, there's no excuse to not do it. If someone wants to do it, don't put it off till tomorrow. Just do it. And the same goes for comedy, for filmmaking, for writing, for any creative field. I mean, look at you, an extremely industrious and intelligent young man. You've gone out and gone, right, I'm going to do this, and you're doing it. You host your own YouTube channel, you've got your own blog, you've got your own website, you've got all of these things happening. You're now a respected reviewer who people like myself I'm hugely honored to talk to. So people just should take a leaf out of Wild Willie's book and get out there and do it. And I guess the other thing I would say is people should support Atlantic Canadian authors as much as possible. There are so many great writers out there. This region is full of amazing authors, and indeed all creatives. And often Atlantic Canadian authors don't get the respect and indeed the kind of spotlight that they deserve elsewhere. So I think that if more people go out and seek out the books by Nimbus Publishing and Goose Lane Editions, and look at all of these Atlantic Canadian book publishers, and check out the work of Nancy Regan, Sarah Butland. There's so many amazing authors out there. People should get out there and check out all these Atlantic Canadian authors, and their lives will be changed as mine have been by reading them.
So yeah, thank you very much, and thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Wild Willie. Keep doing what you do, my friend. You're the man.
Thank you very much.
Cheers.